Hello and welcome to this week's video tutorial for the iRacing Blancpain GT3 series for virtualracingschool.com. In week 9 we visit Oulton Park, one of the best historic club style circuits in the UK. It's known for its narrow layout and constant elevation and camber changes, presenting a real challenge to any driver. The track features a few tricky slow corners but also has very high speed turns which demand a lot of commitment from the driver and leave very little margin for error. I've chosen the BMW Z4 this time, which is quite challenging here but very competitive. Some of the fast crests are difficult to deal with in terms of traction and stability, as you can't afford to run too much downforce, which would otherwise result in too much mid-corner understeer. But as usual, the lap I've driven is on qualifying fuel with default afternoon weather to match the official series. So before we continue into our analysis, I'll first play the lap through for you in full. And across the line there, that was a 1 minute 28.776. So if we just take it back to the exit of the last corner, obviously you want a nice tidy exit, no dramas. Just be careful over this crest before the start finish straight, it can catch you out. And you've got a fairly short run after the start finish line to the braking zone for turn 1. Turn 1 is very fast. Old Hall corner it's known as, and there is a sort of a kink on the left here which I use as a reference to turn in, so I turn in just after there. So if we play it through, so very little braking really, quite a lot of hesitance and patience after I've turned in though, and it's very easy to turn in a bit too soon and you end up taking too much of the apex, and you kind of are forced onto a narrow line, and you sort of run wide at the exit, or you can maybe turn in a bit too late, and you have to slow the car down a bit too much to make it round for the exit again. So the highest apex speed is really important to get your line right. So if we just take it back. So again, to the braking point, if we take it externally. So you've got this marker on the left, but you've also got this kink. So the circuit kinks to the left ever so slightly before turn 1. So keeping the car fully over to the left, and it's not actually just before then. It's pretty much on the kink that I actually hit the brakes. So quite hard initially on the brakes, down into 4th gear I believe it is. Yep. Down again into 3rd actually for the apex. That allows me to get a good amount of power for the exit. So bleeding off the brakes as normal with this car. Yeah, actually letting go of the brakes quite significantly, so I'm not, so that's quite difficult to see, but I am just about breathing right there on the brake pedal. So that just helps me rotate the car on the apex. It's important to get good rotation here. This is pretty much the ideal line. As I said, if you cut the apex a bit too much, it can kind of pick the car up and you start to run wide and don't give yourself enough room for the exit. So if we just take it through, so nice and hard on the power, but not yet to full throttle until the car is straight. So if we just have a look at that. So just after the apex I pick up the throttle straight to about 70 or 80%, and I was quite lucky here not to run out of circuit on the exit. So if you use any more than this is right on the limit, you'll get an instant penalty. So that was good. Managed to keep the car nice and straight on the exit. As soon as I got on that curb, my wheel was nice and straight, which allowed me to... so that's worth noting. That little jink to the right, just there, that might have saved me from an incident. If we just take it externally. So just going to jink right there. Yeah, that probably saved me from getting an incident. So if we take it down through to Cascades, which is blind on entry, but you can sight this curb on the right here. You need to be aiming for that. It's still flat out, and then the circuit kind of drops away from you just after this is turned to Dentons. The circuit really drops away, so you want to be on the brakes just before that happens. And you'll see, so I'm flat out just before I get into the dip. I'm on the brakes, and obviously I've got the car over to the right fully at this point. Could use a tiny bit more track there, and then you need to be heavily trail braking into this fast left-hander. Now I drop down into third again for this one, and it's super important. You've got a very important exit here, long straight. So it's super important that you get on the throttle early, and not only that, getting on the power early helps the rotation, and the track is very unforgiving in terms of an incident penalty on the exit. So that was actually quite nice. There was a large margin of room for error this time, but it's very easy to, in being too eager to get onto the throttle, to just run out of the end of this curb and just get halfway over the track surface here where there's no curbing. So if we just take it back again and just analyze the line a bit more. So yeah, still holding onto the brake pedal, just playing with the throttle in between, in fact, and then I'm breathing on the brake pedal once again, so you can only just see that. It's very subtle, but it is helping the car rotate. And then well before the curb ends, and by the way, another thing to note is that it's a very late apex. It's a very long corner, and you need to turn in very late. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll run out of room on the exit. So in order to have the room to get onto full power, you need to be hitting that red curb on the inside very late. So I think I was just a little bit wide here actually from ideal. You can afford to run onto that curb just a little bit, so I was quite conservative there with my line. And then if we play it down on the run through Island Bend, which is a very scary corner, typically you get a lot of understeer in the BMW here, so basically what you want to be doing is you're flat out until you just about approach this alternative layout, and then once you've reached this you want to be on the brakes, but not braking very hard. All you're really trying to do is rotate the car, sorry. So I'm just kind of trail braking there, about 20% maximum, and I'm trail braking up to the point where I make contact with this curb. And so also it's important to note that you want to aim for a very tight line here, so it's very easy to end up washing out and then end up braking too far over to the right of the circuit into the hairpin. So if you want to open the hairpin up on the entry, what you have to do is keep the car nice and tight through Island Bend. So as soon as you've finished trail braking and you've got this nice tight line, you just make contact with this curb on the inside. You want to be hard on the power, so immediately from trail braking to being hard on the power, and that keeps the car rotating, still in 5th gear as well, and aiming to be as far over to the left as you can, depending on the amount of speed you carried through Island Bend. So I'm braking not fully over to the left, so this is actually quite a nice line that I've got, and we're not making the apex yet, so this is another late apex corner once again, and there's also a lot of camber in the middle of the corner, but despite that you get a lot of understeer, so just you really have to trail brake for a long time here before eventually picking up a super late apex, or finally apexed right at the exit. So this would certainly be a good example of a late apex corner. And you can carry a decent amount of speed in and kind of stop it in the middle of the corner, rotate it with the camber which will pull you around, and then really straighten it up for the exit. So you'll see that finally on the throttle, but I don't get to full throttle until the car's straight. So now I've straightened up the wheel, now I'm at full throttle. That was actually a really nice and clean exit for me. It's very easy to just be a bit too eager on the throttle and end up a little bit wider, and then the circuit kind of crests and levels out at this point. You come out of the camber and you lose a lot of traction if you're too wide. So this is a really nice tight line on the exit, and I had really good traction as a result. So dead simple straight, there's a bit of a kink here, just keep over to the right hand side, then let it gradually wander back over to the left. Thinking about your braking point into Hislops. So there are again some marker boards here. There's a 100 marker. Oh god, that's way too far back. Wrong button. There's a 100 marker. You want to be braking significantly before then. It's difficult to say exactly how much, but I suspect 20 or 30 meters before you want to be on the brakes, hard on the brakes, probably the hardest braking zone on the circuit, so that's about as much pressure as you'll ever see me apply in this car. That's 80 or 90%, and through this Hislops and then Nickerbrook section, it's quite a fiddly chicane. Basically you've got 2 tyre barriers and you want to get as close to each of them as possible, so that you can carry the tightest line through. The other thing to note is it's very much about momentum. Keeping your momentum up and not losing too much speed is key. So line and momentum are absolutely key here. So still on the brakes, down into 2nd gear, finally bleeding off as we turn in. So you'll see I get nice and close to that first tyre barrier on the right. And then just kind of playing with the throttle, opening the steering up again and aiming for this left hand barrier. So notice also that I only get to about, that's another thing, look how late I am on the brakes. So I'm still on the brakes past the apex, and then once I've exited the first part, I'm on the throttle a little bit, about 30 or 40%, and then I'm aiming for this secondary set of tyres, and once again I'm trail braking, and you'll see how close I get to the tyres again. So that was good, and that way you can keep your momentum up, you don't cover as much distance. On the throttle in between the run to Nickerbrook, you want to aim for the left hand side of the circuit again to open up the right hander, which is quite important. You've got a long run down once again towards Druids corner, so you want to bring the car over to the left. Do I get to full throttle? No, I don't. So don't be in a rush to get to full throttle there. You are traction limited in second gear, especially when cornering to bring the car back over to the left. So no need to get to full throttle. And then through the right hander, the circuit kind of drops away, and also you need to be taking the curb on the inside, all of which can really upset the traction of the car. So you want to feather the throttle through this right hander, which you'll see. So I just touched the brakes for rotation again, I guess, just breathing on the brake pedal just to trail brake the car and get it to rotate. And then as soon as I've apexed, I'm now feathering the throttle and eventually committing to, quite early there, I'm committing to full throttle. So if we just play that through. So not yet getting to full throttle, off the throttle, feathering, and then back to full throttle. And also notice that on the exit I have a small correction there, and again for some oversteer. So I'm definitely traction limited there, but the traction control and the counter steer just collected that up and allowed me to commit, which is what you need. And you can use this exit curb as well to carry as much speed as you can up the hill. Hug the inside line up the hill. There's a little curb there. That's not actually as straightforward as it seems, because the circuit kind of crests at this curb, and you can get just a little bit sideways if you're not careful. So be really measured with the steering here, just teasing it through the minimum steering lock necessary to make it through, anticipating that you might. I do actually even straighten the wheel very briefly there, as I feel the rear end lightens over the crest. And then towards Druids corner, this is water tower, slight left kink, which then drops away. You want to be fully over to the left hand side. Get right close to this curve on the left, but don't make contact with it if you can. And in terms of a braking reference for Druids, I'm afraid I don't really have one. I would say, I guess, as the circuit kind of levels out again and you've got this kink on approach as it kind of straightens, it's very much about feel. I mean, you've got this barrier here which ends on the right, depending on your field of vision. You want to be braking before then, and this is not necessarily always a third gear corner. Sometimes it's fourth gear, depending on how well the car rotates, but I find it's quite understeery generally in fourth, so I use third for better rotation. So on the brakes, reasonably hard, but not super hard because I'm turning right to keep it within the track. And then as I'm I'm still approaching the edge of the circuit on the brakes, but as I'm turning in, so I probably could have used a bit more track there on entry, but it was still nice because it's more important to hook up with. There's two apexes here, so you got this first apex here, that's very important, and then the next one is even more important, because it's a very high speed exit, and then you've got a bit of a crest again, which we'll explain very shortly. Also notice I'm still trail braking very, very slightly here, just a couple of percent, just breathing on the pedal just to get the rotation. And you can see how let me just play that again. You can see how I never fully let go of the brakes. And then this is really important to maintain that rotation. Before the second and final apex, you need to be hard on the throttle. It's quite a high speed corner, so you shouldn't be traction limited, so you want to keep that rotation for the exit, which tightens ever so slightly. So hard on the throttle, but not quite to full throttle, so hard to about 80 or 90% just before the second apex, and then committing to full throttle just as you reach this crest. Now sometimes, well, you certainly need to be open with the steering wheel as you crest over here. So notice how I straighten the wheel pretty much as soon as the rear end goes light, which is very much similar to the approach up Clay Hill and towards Water Tower. You just want to be careful with the rear end going light, that you don't get a bit too much of a wiggle going. And then obviously that opens up the car nicely, which results in me running over this exit curb slightly, but I'm still keeping the car over to the left on the run down towards the final corner, Lodge corner. This was really nice for me. I had a really nice tight apex with a good apex speed as well. So there is a turn-in sign here which you can use as your braking reference. So I think I pretty much brake exactly, not exactly, so I brake just after. So I was obviously quite late on the brakes this time. So yeah, you can afford on a qualifying lap, nice grippy tyres, to be fairly late on the brakes. Down into second gear, just bleeding off the brakes. Nice positive turn in. You can afford to turn in reasonably early here, because the corner does open up slightly on the exit. But the most important thing is that you have a nice tight apex, so that way you can carry a decent amount of apex speed and then a decent amount of exit speed as well. So we're nice and tight here using all of the curb. You don't want to be touching the grass though. So and the other thing is, notice how again I'm continuing to trail brake very, very deep and late in the corner. So that's because basically I want to get the car rotated really well before I get onto the throttle for the exit. So I want to get the car rotated as soon as possible, basically, so I can then straighten up the wheel and apply the throttle early as well for a good exit. So bringing in the throttle nice and progressively here. We are in second gear, so you are definitely traction limited, so you need to be careful with the throttle. And the circuit also falls away, so that's the other issue. You lose a bit of tractive grip, let's call it, as the circuit kind of drops away. So just be aware of that. Try and have the car nice and straight when the circuit does fall away, and as you get onto this exit curb you really need to have the wheel nice and straight. And I'm able to get to full throttle nice and early here before I've reached the exit curve. So that was a very nice exit, and it's not quite over yet. You have another crest which should be relatively straightforward, but it can catch you out sometimes. If we just play this through, so you can actually hear the engine revs just very subtly and briefly rise. Let me just play that again. So just before I reach fourth gear, you just lose a tiny bit of traction, which can catch you out. So once again, don't try and take too tight a line as you do crest over the top here. Try and keep the wheel nice and straight in anticipation for some oversteer. I was a little bit brave this time. I kept the car really tight because I felt comfortable enough that it wouldn't get away from me, and it will result in a quicker lap time, a shorter run across the start finish line. So yeah, I recommend watching the full lap again from earlier. And yeah, as ever, you can find qualifying and race setups, telemetry and replays over at virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-to-one tuition with myself and top drivers from the likes of Coanda Simsport and Team Redline. Good luck for this week, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.